Hey everyone, my name is Catherine and welcome to my channel, and today I wanted to talk about what books I read in the month of October this year. I'm pretty sure that this past month of October I have read more books in 1 month alone than I have any other month in my life. And I counted, and including 2 audiobooks that I listened to in the car, I have read or listened to a total of 7 books this month. So I have the books right here, and then I also have the audiobooks that I will talk about. I was walking around in an Amazon bookstore and I saw 2 books, and one of them was this one, My Inner Sky on Embracing Day, Night, and All the Times in Between by Mary Andrew. I love the colors of the cover, and basically, if you don't know, Mary Andrew, so she's an illustrator. She uses a lot of color, a lot of watercolor. So she'll draw a lot of things like this. Basically, this book is about the feelings that exist between joy and sorrow. In the soulful and validating collection, writer and illustrator Mary Andrew invites us to dive deeply into all emotions that make up a life. In the process, she offers insights about trauma and healing, the meaning of home, the challenges of loneliness, finding love in the most unexpected of places. I just kind of wanted to read the bio. The way she just writes, I think, is so comforting and just so nice to read. I really enjoy this book. I read it in a few days, and although she has some illustrations thrown into it, it is mostly like a proper book. And it just talks about her life lessons. She's lived in a lot of different places, from growing up in Seattle, which is where I grew up. She worked briefly in DC, which I went to school in DC, so have that similarities. She's currently in New York and talks a lot about her love for New York. She went abroad for a bit. She was in Spain, and she just talks about big things, such as she got sick in Spain and it sounded pretty bad. So talking about that experience and how horrible that was, but also talking about, like, I remember there's this part where she was walking in New York, and there's this place in the middle of a certain part of New York where migrating birds can stop and basically have a rest stop in the middle of the concrete jungle. And so she made it a routine where she would just watch the birds, and she was talking about like how confused the birds must be because they're like migrating across the US, but then they see this concrete jungle, but at the same time this like solitude for them that's meant for migrating birds. And I feel like I don't do it justice describing it, but I really did enjoy this book. Now the next book is very different. The first one was very comforting, life lessons, learning to appreciate the small things in life, mindfulness, kind of all of that. And the next one that I got at the same Amazon store is Then She Was Gone by Jewell. This is the first book I've read from her, and it is a thriller. My favorite genres are typically like mystery, murder mystery, thriller books, missing people, all that stuff. Crime, basically. It is about a girl named Ellie who was like the perfect daughter, like great family, overall good life. And one day, out of nowhere, she disappeared. 10 years after Ellie had disappeared, no one had known what had happened. And her mom, Laurel, is trying to put her life back together because, as you can imagine, that would tear a mother apart. And she meets a charming man in a cafe. And before she knows it, she's like falling in love with this man. His name is Floyd. She's meeting his daughters. And basically, she's finally like finding love again because she got a divorce after her daughter went missing and her life fell apart. And she's noticing that one of the daughters seems very like there's a lot of similarities between her and then the daughter that she had go missing 10 years prior. And then it just goes down from there. I really enjoyed it, but at the same time it was so dark that it like made me feel kind of weird. I don't know, but I do really enjoy that book and do recommend it if you're into the kind of dark mystery, missing people, all that stuff. This one was the next one, Out of Love by Hazel Hayes. It basically starts at the end, and then as you read more, you learn more about the relationship, and they end up breaking up, which isn't a spoiler. You know that going into the book because it starts at the end. You know they break up. It's a 5-year relationship, and the more you read, the more in the past you go, and you get to know like what happened, what went wrong. I'm a very sappy, girly, like person when it comes to romance, so I don't like that they broke up. But I did enjoy reading this book and I do recommend it. The next book I read is A Solitude of Wolverines. But this book is about a biologist named Alex, and she has gone on a mission to study wolverines at a wildlife sanctuary in Montana. So this is a very rural, small town place, and she's staying at an abandoned ski resort that was thriving in the 30s to 60s. And when they had the ski resort, the wolverine population basically just died out in the area. And since it has been decades since the 60s, people were starting to think that the wolverine population was starting to come back. So they had Alex go out and basically set up cameras and try to count the wolverine population. That's what she was out to do, and she was staying at the abandoned ski resort. When she is taking these pictures, like she'll leave the cameras and they'll take a picture when a wolverine or some animal or something like touches like the trap, and then it takes pictures. And she saw a man in the background of these photos. She went to the police and was like, who is this man? He was like barefoot and throwing up and clearly in distress and needed help. And the police kind of just brushed it off. And as you read more and more, you basically find out that Alex is getting suspicious and things are just not adding up. Weird things are happening. Like every time, I feel like for most of the book, she goes out to set up or check on the traps, something happens in the woods. And I'm just surprised this woman is brave enough to keep going back out alone when these things are happening. And there's like this underground operation that she ends up like finding about, and it's just insane. So I really enjoyed this book. I think honestly, out of all the books I read, this might have been my favorite. And she's having a second book come out the first week of November. It's about polar bears, so it's basically going to be a series of like Alex doing different trips, studying different animals. So this one was in Montana for wolverines, the next one will be polar bears, and I believe like the Canadian Arctic. So very excited to read that. The next book is A World of Wonders, In Praise of Fireflies, Whale Sharks, and Other Astonishments. I just think this cover is absolutely gorgeous, and it is actually Barnes & Noble's book of the year. So I had to read it given that I love nature and this is all about wildlife, and it's the Barnes & Noble book of the year, and it's a really small read. This is about the author, who I do not know how to say her last name, but there you go. It is about her life growing up and then tying in animals and nature into her life and how she appreciates it, and just looking at the beauty of the world that we live in. And I thought it was really beautiful, for sure. This woman had an interesting life. I'm just looking at the back of the book right now. She like moved around a lot. At one moment she's in Arizona, another moment she's in Western New York, but now she's in Mississippi. And it talks about her growing up, her children, her husband. An example of one of her stories, because each chapter is basically focusing on a different animal or plant, is, I'll show you. It looks like this. It'll give you an illustration, and then they'll talk about that plant or animal, in this case a plant, and some kind of theme in her life. And this is the corpse flower, and she was basically saying how this is like a very large flower that also, when it like blossoms, I think once every couple of years, it has like a horrific smell, but people will literally line up outside of like the greenhouse or the conservation area to be able to get a whiff of this smell, because people just want to know what it smells like. It's like really talked about apparently. She tied it to her dating life, this flower, because she would go on dates and the men would ask like, what are your hobbies, or what are you interested, or something like that, like classic question. And she would go on and talk about this corpse flower because she just really loves it. It thinks it's beautiful. Most men have been like, that's weird. And so that when they like react like that, she knows, okay, I don't want to date this man. But when one man gets really excited and asks more about the corpse flower, and even says, next time there's one that blooms, we should go and see it, even if it's like not near us, like I'm interested, I want to know more, and was genuine about it, then she knew that he's worth pursuing. So that is literally how she met her husband, and I think that's really cute and sweet. Okay, as for My last books, they're both audiobooks. The first one that I listened to in the car is Verity. If you can see, I might just have to put a picture up. And it is by Colleen Hoover, who right now is my favorite author, to be honest. If you're on Book Talk on TikTok, she's pretty popular on there. And this book was insane. She was actually able to combine romance and thriller into one. So basically there's this writer called Lowen, and she is in financial ruin, and she gets offered a job of a lifetime by Jeremy, and Verity came down with a illness and is basically bedridden and not able to move and not able to therefore finish her best-selling series. She had started a series, had multiple books out and published in the world and were extremely popular, and she needed to finish it, but she couldn't. So Jeremy hired Lowen to finish the series. So she goes to their house basically because Verity's office is there, and she actually hadn't read the series, so she had to like read the series and read all the different things in Verity's office to get a sense of her writing style. And when she's staying at this house, a lot of things go down, and I don't want to give anything away, but there's a lot of twists. You never know what's gonna happen, and it's just full of surprises and shocks. And I remember just driving and being like on the edge of my seat. So I really do enjoy that book, definitely recommend it. And the next book I read was Local Missing Woman by Mary Kubica. There's multiple points of views, and there are two women and one of the woman's daughters that go missing in on the same street in a very short period of time. There's Shelby Thibault, who's the first to go missing, and then there's Meredith Dickey and her 6-year-old Delilah, and they just vanish. It was a peaceful community, everyone's shocked, they're thinking, are these incidents connected, what's going on? No one knew what happened at all. Then 11 years later, Delilah, the 6-year-old daughter, returns, and everyone is shocked. It goes through multiple points of views, but also multiple time points. There's a lot going on, a lot of different perspectives and different people, and at first it was hard for me to understand who's who, but then I quickly latched on. I don't know if I'm bad at predicting the ending of books, or if I'm just getting good books that are catching me by surprise. So I also definitely recommend that book. Those are the books that I have read and listened to in October. If you have read any of these books, or if you are planning to read any of these books, let me know. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have a good day. Bye.